Joining us now are Alexi McCammon, MSNBC political analyst and host of the In Sync with Alexi podcast, and Megan Hayes, former special assistant to President Biden and his former director of message planning. Alexi, do you agree with Congressman Frost? Is this elevated cosplay? And what do you think the message is when these two gentlemen come to Capitol Hill? What are they trying to send?
Unfortunately, I don't agree. And I think that although it's a committee that exists outside of official government, they are still two very influential figures in Donald Trump's orbit. Elon Musk is referred to by many as the so-called shadow president of this transition period already. He's been by Trump's side through the election and since he won the election. They just sat down at the Aspen Institute with Axios, and Vivek Ramaswamy talked about all the plans they have and basically just said, well, when it comes to legislation, the voters have decided already by electing who they've elected to Congress. And so
I just want to point out, Musk was also in Paris today at the big event with Donald Trump and all those world leaders. So just reinforcing your point there. Sorry, continue. Yeah.
Exactly. No, exactly right. So I think, yes, the committee might not be legitimate, but those two figures are incredibly influential, and they will be the ones directing a lot of what Trump asks Republican lawmakers to do at the end of the day.
Dismiss at your own risk. Megan, I want to turn to you now. Republicans are saying, look, hard decisions are ahead, and that they plan to bring Democrats in to discuss cuts to Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. Is this a non-starter? Are Democrats going to be open to any of these conversations?
I think they are going to have to take a holistic look at the budget, including defense spending and including the other entitlement programs that we have, because that's over 90% of our government. I know that DOGE is looking at the civil servants, which is only about 8 to 10% of our budget. And so I do think that they're going to have to look at these programs if they want to have to actually cut, and Democrats are going to have to work with Republicans in the next Congress to get things done. I'm not sure that they are going to cut Social Security. I don't think that's very popular for either Democrats or Republicans, but we will see what happens. But Democrats are going to have to work with Republicans in the next Congress.
Alexi, you've got these somewhat sacred programs. We just mentioned two of them, but defense spending, especially for Republicans, tends to be the other one right up there with Social Security and other benefits. But it's also very costly, and it's a big part of the budget. However, it's not really listed overtly as a DOGE target. Now, Elon Musk, of course, owns several companies with federal and defense contracts. Do you think that bringing defense spending into this conversation could change by the inclusion of Democrats like Jared Moskowitz joining the DOGE caucus?
Oh, certainly. I mean, even last year, we've seen Democrats on these committees going after Elon and asking for more transparency because of the sheer number of federal contracts that he has with Starlink and other parts of his businesses. And as we've been talking about so far, he's gaining more power, even though he is not technically an elected official. And you couple that with those federal contracts he already has, you think about how much more power he is trying to accumulate by his proximity to Trump and others in government. I think it's going to be really tough for Democrats to actually hold him accountable or make changes to those federal contracts. But I would expect that at the very least, we will hear from Democrats calling for more transparency and a review of what those contracts actually look like and should look like moving forward.
Alexi, do you think Trump's base, the people who voted for him, if you're looking at older, largely white middle Americans, a lot of them are dependent on programs like Social Security, on Medicaid. Do you think they really want Trump's cuts to these programs? Is that what Trump voters are looking for?
No, and Megan mentioned earlier how popular these programs are. It is difficult to find consensus on any issue, but 80% of Americans agree that they don't want Social Security benefits, for example, to be cut from any sort of plans that Elon or President-elect Trump have. The problem, of course, is that Trump has flipped on this issue, and so no one totally knows where he stands when. But if it comes down to it, we have heard how ruthless Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy want to be when it comes to cutting spending. We know they will do whatever it takes to make Trump happy.
All right, Megan, I want to turn to you now. Trump's defense secretary pick, Pete Hegseth, was back on Capitol Hill this week. His mom even went to stump for him on television, which, might be a tactic I'll try in my next job interview. And senators asked about his alcohol consumption. Are Republican senators likely to support his nomination? now that Trump has declared that he thinks he's doing well?
No, I think that they're still going through the process, and I think that they are still going through their confirmation hearing process with all these meetings on the Hill. I think Joni Ernst is a big person who, the folks are going to be looking to, since sexual assault in the military is one of her passion issues, as she is a veteran. But I don't think that people are just going to blanket Pete Hegseth getting this nomination through just because Trump said. I think that there are a lot of problems, not only his character problems, but the fact that he's just wholly incompetent and cannot, does not have the ability to do the job. They've talked about how he ran 2 veterans programs into the ground, and he just does not have the ability or the experience to run such a large program like DOD. And I think that these senators, Democrats and Republicans, are going to take these meetings and these hearings very seriously, because this is an extremely important agency, as we just noted about how important it is to the budget. But I don't think that he is just going to get a rubber stamp because this is who Trump wants.
And there seem to be some more potentially palatable candidates waiting in the wings. Alexi, speaking of non-palatable candidates, one of the other more controversial picks is Tulsi Gabbard, who's going to embark on her Senate charm offensive next week. But nearly 100 former national security officials wrote a letter saying they are alarmed that she might leak intelligence to places that shouldn't go. So very quickly, why is she such a concern, and do you think she's going to make it through?
Yeah, it's her concern because of her close relationships with certain foreign leaders, and again, how she handles or maybe potentially mishandles certain types of classified or sensitive information. You put that on top of someone like President-elect Trump, who we know does not take seriously the handling of classified documents and is willing to share things with people to curry favor in different ways. And so those two together is an alarming combination to folks who want to protect America's national security interests.
All right, Alexi McCammond, Megan Hayes, thank you both so much for being with us.